Everyone's always like, I need more attention. I need more attention. You don't.
Right.
Capitalize on the attention that you do have. That's why it's important to know these traffic temperatures, because if you know them, then you know how many people are sort of hanging out in them, and you can start putting together really, really cool campaigns to sort of capitalize on that, build those relationships with those fans and take them to the next level.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I'm your host, Corrin Campbell. With me is Jack McCarthy, as always. How's it going, Jack?
It is going beautifully on a beautiful first Tuesday in March. I can't believe we're already here. March of 2021. We made it.
I know, right? It's been a long one. There's been a lot of conversation about live streaming and when is touring coming back and when are things going to get back to normal. It's exhausting. I'm kind of like, I'm not in the crystal ball business. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I'd rather just take it one day at a time, but it does seem to go a little slower that way. You know,
we made our predictions back at the end of the year, about specifically like the coming back topic. I'll link to that in the show notes so that we have it, but I actually am going to go back and look at our predictions and just sort of track like, oh, are we on track to hit those?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I don't know. All I'm trying to do is focus on what I can do right now.
Heard that.
And it's something that I do, a lot of the time when I am, trying to figure out what to do next is sometimes I look back. And that's a nice little segue into introducing a new theme, right? We decided that we want to, Jack and I both, and I'm going to let Jack speak for himself, but, obviously we're constantly trying out new tech tools and, familiarizing ourselves with them. And then you get to be pretty good at it, right? And then something changes. For example, the iOS 14 changes in Facebook. And sometimes you have to go back and be like, okay, there might be a change or there might be something going on, and I'm going to need to, maybe relearn the other way to do this thing that I didn't remember, or I wasn't relying on. And for me, a lot of times, sometimes I'll even, when I'm in a tech stack and I've been using it for a while, they'll have little tutorials that are like basics of whatever. And so sometimes just for fun, I'll go in there and take a look at it and I'll learn something, even though it's basic. I'll just let, one thing that I did when I migrated Entrepreneur to Drip, we were trying to do a lot in a small amount of time so that we didn't have too much overlap between our last provider and our new one. And so I set up a bunch of stuff. And after I started to use Drip more and more, and I looked through some of these other tutorials, I was like, it would have been way simpler if I just did it this way, So sometimes we have to go back and relearn things. And, I think that that's what we want to start doing on the Entrepreneur podcast as well, is bring that into Creative Juice and kind of embrace knowing the ins and outs of things at a basic level, because that's really what you build upon to do more advanced things. So that we're starting a new thing. This is back to basics. I think it should be noted that we won't just cover basic information, but it's more about looking at the definitions of things and maybe touching back on something that we haven't thought about in a while. So yeah, I'm excited for it.
I'm excited too. Welcome to Back to Basics. I think this is going to be a lot of fun because I don't know about you, Corrin, but speaking for myself, I, over the years, have often found myself going back to, you mentioned like tech trainings and things like that, but really any kind of resources that I've used kind of along my journey as a marketer or whatever, really, that I've learned on. And I often find myself going back to the things that had a massive impact on me when I was either, first learning something or, leveling up a skill set or whatever. And I find myself going back to those things, revisiting them and picking up something that I either totally missed before because I was so green on it that it just, something went right over my head, or picking up something new or in a new light, just based on the experiences that I've had since I first visited. I find this often with podcast episodes that I've liked, that I've revisited. Certainly, like a lot of my kind of early marketing knowledge came from DM Lab, digital marketer, and going back and revisiting them, it's like opening your favorite book, and finding new things in it, or watching your favorite movie and seeing a scene that, maybe you didn't recognize or didn't hit you quite the way that it does now. Right. I think that's going to be something cool for us to explore here. So even for indies that, might feel like, we're touching on something that they know a lot about, hopefully, both for your sake and for ours, we can bring some new, fresh ideas to things that, can always use some revisiting. Some of the evergreen sort of core concepts of marketing and music and the music business that deserve to be reflected on and kind of revisited from time to time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes, when you're trying to learn a tech tool, you're trying to implement it right away, right? This isn't like a college course. I mean, at least not for me. Like, as an indie musician, I'm like, okay, I need to do this thing. How do I do it? And then I find a tech tool that does it, and I'm like, okay, activate. And I try to get this whole ecosystem set up to do that thing. And sometimes I skip steps, right? Like, even if you've gone through like our Fan Finder training, for example, it really does bring you through step by step. But there are some maybe more basic elements of advertising that we've kind of helped you skip, right? So that you know how to do what you need to do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you understand the inner workings of things, right? Which is why Circa put together the Facebook ads guide, which is in the Indie Pro area, so that we understand not just how to do things, but why and the structure behind it, because that makes you able to, be more flexible and do more advanced things and elevate your understanding later. So yeah, this is going to be fun. Jack, I'd like you to kick us off for what we're going to be covering today, because I think it's definitely a wheelhouse of yours.
Yeah, for sure. So I love this topic. Today we're going to be talking about traffic. And, we can talk on traffic of all kinds, whether it's organic traffic, paid traffic, but we're just going to be talking about traffic today. And specifically, we're going to touch on what traffic temperatures are and what those mean when it comes to your fan base, what kinds of marketing you might do for different types of traffic temperatures of your audience. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Touching on cold traffic, warm traffic, hot traffic, what all of that means, how it's actionable to you, and how you can best utilize, these definitions and these kind of constructs in your marketing for your music.
Yeah, definitely. So let's start at the beginning, right? Which is super hot traffic. Oh, wait, just kidding. I'm just kidding. Obviously, the temperature goes from cold to hot, right? So, Jack, why don't you kick us off with cold traffic? Let's go there, because if you are a grassroots artist, you're largely going to be dealing in cold traffic at first, and then moving into warmth. So let's start there and kind of talk about, how that, define it a little more, as well as how we adjust, take actions, advertise, talk to them.
Totally, yeah. So let's define cold traffic. Cold traffic, simply put, are audiences, people that do not know who you are, or maybe they know who you are, but they don't care about you. They really have no vested interest in seeing what you have to put out there. They're not interested in you. They
don't care.
They don't care. They probably haven't heard your music. They would be the most likely people to, upon seeing your post or your ads or, coming across you, most likely to pass on by, or in a worst case scenario, say something like, who gives a shit? That is your cold traffic. So how do you tap into cold traffic? What do you do to get in front of these people and get in front of them in a way that's impactful and gets their attention? Well, we often talk about doing this in a way that seems indirect or native. Making indirect introductions is often touted as one of the best ways of, attracting attention from someone, rather than bursting into a room and introducing yourself directly to someone at a party. A better introduction is for a friend to say like, hey, this is Corrin and she's super duper cool. you should know her.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome. You should be paying attention to what she does and the music that she makes. When it comes to cold traffic, this is the kind of marketing that you often are looking to kind of tap into as a musician. Very native to the platform, whatever it might be that you're advertising or trying to get attention of an audience on. Native, indirect can work really, really well. And that's where, campaigns like the Fan Finder campaign come into play. So that is kind of a little bit of a touch point on cold traffic.
Awesome. And so if we were to look at, obviously we love paid traffic, right? And of all levels, cold and warm and super hot. But, when we're talking about hashtag marketing, for example, or Instagram Explore, or, sometimes this desire to go viral on TikTok, that is still considered an effort to reach cold traffic, right?
Absolutely.
It's not as easy to do it purposefully and do it with an expected result from for whatever investment, whether it's your time, the money to produce that content, things like that. So I think that's an important distinguishing thing to highlight, is that you're not always going to be able to, just bring cold traffic to you, right? Unless you're using paid ads. And I think that's something I'd like to address that even a little bit deeper, because I do think that, hashtags and trends and, Instagram Reels is a thing. And, so there's a lot of people making a lot of efforts. And I would like to dig into, what kind of organic strategies you've seen, Jack, and then maybe comparing that to its paid counterparts.
Yeah, for sure. So that's great to touch on. Something I think that you said that's spot on, and one of the reasons that I love paid traffic as much as I do is that when you find a strategy that works when it comes to paid traffic, like for example, Fan Finder campaigns, you follow a strategy, you build great content, you put it together in a way that is appealing to someone, and you pay for that traffic. It's predictable. You can you can measure, what your KPIs are looking like. You can measure, campaigns against one another, and really, you're not dealing with trends or trying to game algorithmic reach or anything like that. When it comes to organic cold traffic efforts, a lot of what you're dealing with is based on, things like organic reach, algorithmic organic reach, or trends that are happening with hashtags, or trends that are happening on TikTok, for example, like, what the trending kind of content is that week. All of these things
or like Bernie Sanders sitting in a chair memes.
Yeah, memes, exactly.
Like overtook the world. And like, if you did it that week, there were a lot of people. And I think, sorry to cut you off, Jack, I want to highlight this specific example because I felt like in the first week of Bernie Sanders memes, I was absolutely pummeled with them. I would open my laptop or start up my desktop, and I would just be assaulted by Bernie Sanders memes. Yeah. And it's because more and more people have started to realize trends don't last very long, Yep. And if you want to be doing things organically that are a trend, like you better get on it right now. That's the only way that it's going to be special. If I see a Bernie Sanders meme now, I'm like, okay, yeah, I've seen that, and even if it's funny, it's not as funny and I'm not as likely to share it, Yeah. And so that's what's the hard thing about following these trends, right? Is that more and more people are following trends and they're doing it well. So I think it's really tough to kind of quantify how beneficial that is to your brand and the efforts of doing that organically alone.
Yeah, and you can't very well predict how long a trend is going to last for. You could have some averages of like, oh, I know memes typically last this long, but like you never really know how long you can ride the wave of one particular trend that's happening, whether it's a meme or a content type or a series of hashtags, a trending topic, any of that kind of like trend jacking, organic style marketing that you could do. Like you can't really predict how long it's going to work for, how quickly it's going to get oversaturated, and how quickly an audience is going to tire of it. And that's some of the challenges that you're up against when it comes to cold traffic from an organic sense. those are, the sorts of things that I often see when it comes to, strategies that people are using are, building up a hashtag list and using that when it comes to your organic posting on IG, for example. I know on Instagram, I know on TikTok, certain types of content very quickly become trendy and people kind of use it as a way to tap into organic cold traffic. Duets are another big one on TikTok that a lot of people kind of dive into. But yeah, I mean, even memes, like you said, like the Bernie Sanders meme, like I saw so many even artists and bands kind of trying to ride that wave.
Absolutely.
All the time. Yeah. So that's a lot of what I see when it comes to like organic, cold traffic acquisition, in addition to things like, follow for follow, or, like for like, comment for comment type stuff, where you're going and instead of, trying to ride a wave of trend, you're engaging with people in the hopes that they will see your engagement as authentic and then engage back with you and, get in a conversation, so to speak. That's another thing. The challenge with that
I do hear that recommended a lot, going to artists that are similar to you and going in their comments on a post and then
talking
commenting
to their people.
Yeah. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. It makes me feel icky. I want to know what you think about that.
Not a huge fan of it. I'm probably not a huge fan of it because I think it takes a lot of your time, where your time and your money could probably be better invested elsewhere,
Yeah.
Like paid traffic.
Just to mention one alternative.
Yeah. Just one quick little mention there. No, but that's one of the big reasons that I've never been a huge proponent of that. I think in some cases it can have benefit for some people, and you might see it like, cause some sort of an uptick for you, but I don't see it as like a scalable strategy. That's for sure. And with that in mind, like, to be totally honest, like, if you're spending your time doing that with cold traffic and trying to just get random people's attentions based on commenting on other artists' posts, you might be better served just communicating with the audience that you already have, and just talking with them day to day. Like, if you really want to drop into random people's DMs, why don't you spend your time doing it with your actual fans that you have right now?
Right.
If you're gonna spend your time doing that. So yeah.
Yeah. Something that I've done to kind of reinvigorate, because obviously people, IG has been around for, 10 years my earliest photo on Instagram is 10 years ago. It's probably been even longer than that, and it's, people will follow you and then maybe they drift off, and we can use paid advertising to reach people who have interacted with you in the last 365 days. But if someone followed you 5 years ago and you weren't posting consistently and there just isn't a reason for them to have engaged with you, sometimes it can be good to like go back and scroll down to the older followers, right? And go to their profile and comment on something about them. And then it makes the interaction that's about you and them, not about this other artist, Yes. I would rather have a connection with someone based on either something in their life that I like, or if they have, clothes or a message or, post something that I identify with. It's like, yeah, we have this in common. And it's not something that's a direct kind of linear relationship to the thing that I'm going to try to get them to care about with me,
Right. Yeah.
So, so I think that's something that a lot of people, kind of forget is, there's a ton of people that maybe you haven't reached in a while. Even if you're grassroots, you probably have some followers that you haven't touched base with in a good while. And so going over to their profile and, liking something that they've posted and commenting on it and engaging them there. If you are going to spend a lot of that, hand-to-hand time with people, I think that's a better investment personally. I
agree. And I mean, that's talking about really like, we'll get into this in a second, but that's talking about your warm traffic that went cold, So then you're...
Can you tell I was trying to segue?
Yeah, nice segue there. That was great.
Well, thank you. I try.
But that is, that's warm traffic that is kind of gone lukewarm or cold. And that's one way of hand to hand, I think is really a cool way of reinvigorating those people and letting them know like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still doing my thing. I hope you didn't think that I don't care about you. I'm still around,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and climb into that, right? So we've got cold traffic, people who have, maybe never even heard of you or seen you. And then we've got people who cared about you at one point, maybe very much or maybe not so much, right? But enough where you've touched base with them before at some point and you haven't engaged with them. Maybe, and this also applies, even though this isn't really traffic, like with your mailing list or something like that, right? It's still the same avatar, so to speak. It's still the same type of conversation and person. And, if you've ever done that before where you've got a mailing list and it's, super duper cold and you send them an email out of nowhere after 2 years of never saying anything, you're going to get a lot of people that are like, I'm out of here,
Yeah.
Because it seems very transactional at that point. But there are efforts you can make to warm people up who are cold on your socials or, in your audiences that don't necessarily feel transactional. And I think that's, the IG thing I mentioned is a way to do it, but there's a lot of organic and paid ways to do that. So, Jack, where do you want to take us on that first?
Yeah, well, let's just kind of unpack warm traffic because like you said, warm traffic can consist of people who were interested in you at some point in time. Mm-hmm. But it can also be just people who are discovering you for the very first time. Warm traffic kind of, I think, spans a wide range of people, from people who have been around for a while and just haven't taken a next step with you, and people who are just discovering you and are, waiting for you to put the right thing in front of them to take that next step. Warm traffic can be a lot. It can be the people who, watched your music video for the first time or, heard a clip of one of your songs or discovered some of your content or, saw that viral post or that viral TikTok, whatever it might be.
Right.
All of those people kind of fall into, what you could call a warm audience, which is great because there's so much you can do just based on the fact that there's a wide variety of people in there. So just, off the top of my head, like warm traffic strategies. And this is something that, most musicians, artists find themselves talking about is like, what's my content strategy? How do I keep people engaged once they find me for the first time? I think that's kind of like touch point number one when it comes to warm traffic is like, once people find you, why do they stay? What's happening in your world that makes them want to hang around? So are you releasing music on a regular basis? Are you posting content on a regular basis? What does that look like? Are you going live? These are all sort of like warm traffic strategies and ideas for keeping those people warm and continuing to warm them further towards, whatever the next step for them might be, whether that's becoming a subscriber, whether that's becoming a customer for the first time, or going deeper and deeper and deeper. So that's kind of point number one, I think, is like, what are you doing to, just generally speaking, what are you doing to keep people excited beyond that first touch? I know we talked about this a little bit on last week's podcast episode where I said like, the music industry at large is really good at top of funnel or tries to be really good at top of funnel mass awareness. But then, when it comes to like middle of the funnel, it starts to falter and fall apart and sputter and not know what to do and all of that. I think this is kind of like where that dipping of the toes starts to happen is how do you keep people engaged? What are you doing creatively to make that happen? Right.
Yeah. And this is, I think, a great point to kind of highlight. This is where tracking is so important, right? If you're using Facebook Business Manager, right, for example, you've got the ability to target people up to 365 days on your Instagram and up to 365 days on your Facebook page if they engaged with it. So that could be that they commented on one of your posts. It could mean that they visited your profile. It could mean that they watched a story from you. It could mean, that they've messaged you in many cases.
Yeah.
So, all of that is considered engagement. And once they hit 366 days with no engagement, it's a lot harder, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot more difficult to retarget them. Now on the other, and so, and you can also, for example, say that you're running some kind of, campaign, whether it's a video view or something like that, and you're bringing in cold traffic, as Jack's talking about. At that point, if you wanted to do like a really low budget ad for reach of people who have engaged with your Instagram in the last 3 days, you could send them another ad, right? And kind of elevate them that way. So with Instagram and Facebook, that's internally tracked. You don't really have to do anything with that. It's just available. However, if you're sending people to your site or to your store or to a landing page for your DSPs, your Spotify, iTunes, etc., you need to have some kind of pixel or tracking code on there. With Facebook, it's the pixel. And with Google Analytics, that's they also have a code for that, as well as any other, there are many other providers of tracking, but, those are really the big two. And Facebook will allow you to essentially retouch on people who have been on your site or any of these places for 180 days, so half a year. But if you don't have that, then you're kind of missing some potential windows, right? Because there might be people who, just aren't on social media very much, but they still go to your site sometimes, or, they end up on your site because they watched a YouTube video, or they end up on your site because they saw something about you on another site or on a blog or something, right? Or maybe they Google you, and then end up at your website there. So that's why tracking is particularly important, is so that you can identify who those warm people are. And, really when I'm looking at these, newer warm audiences, I find my website audience to be very, very valuable when I'm retargeting them or trying to do something with advertising with that particular audience. Even more valuable than, the Facebook and IG engagement. So, that's where tracking starts to come in. And, obviously that's the very beginnings of tracking. But that's where it's important, and most people listening to this podcast probably already have their pixel, probably already have their analytics. But it is something that, wherever you may be sending people organically or not, you want to have something that's pixel enabled. Jack, do you know if Linktree offers pixel integration?
I don't think Linktree does. Maybe with one of the paid tiers, if that exists. Honestly,
right.
I'm not totally sure on Linktree.
Right.
I don't think any of our IndieXers are using Linktree as like the dedicated service.
Oh, that's fun.
A lot of people.
So that's an example, right? Like if you have a link in your bio and it sends them to Linktree, then they're gone, right? That's why, like on mine, right now I just have the general site. But if I have multiple campaigns going on, I will actually have the link in my bio on Instagram feeding to a page that's on my site. Right? That actually, and you can do the exact same thing. Just make buttons with links on them. That's really all Linktree is. And you can also have it branded then in your artist colors and fonts and, make it a little bit more customized. So, and now I have them pixeled, and I can even pixel the buttons depending on what they click on. So, that's something that I think is really valuable. And so when you're looking at this new warm traffic that maybe discovered you on IG and then they click that link in your bio, you want to know that they went to your site because that's, 2 layers deep instead of 1. So I definitely just wanted to make sure, like, if you don't already have tracking and you're using something like Linktree for your Instagram bio link, maybe consider putting that on a site somewhere where you can actually track their activity there.
Yeah, totally. And to give a little shout out to Linktree, I did a quick little peek. The pro version of Linktree does allow for Facebook pixel integration. So if you're using the free version, consider bumping up. Or like Corrin was saying, just, building out one on your own on your site. Save yourself some cost and save your data. But yeah, absolutely. I think like constantly repopulating that warm audience is kind of the goal, keeping those people continuously warm and making sure that they don't fall off at that 365-day window on platform or 180-day window off platform.
Right.
Is so important. And that's kind of where like things like content strategy come into play when it comes to like traffic temperature and what you're retargeting people for. What are the bribes that you have in place to pull people onto your list, onto a channel that you own? Are you making sales offers to them regularly? Retargeting ads to warm audiences for sales is something that we do a lot of, especially for artists that are running sales promotions or running funnels to warm audiences. That's kind of where a lot of the steps of the buddy system kind of start to fall into place is in these retargetable sort of actions that we can make to people.
Right. And so what's interesting here is that cold traffic is pretty much just cold, right? Like it is, they either know who you are or they don't know who you are, right? And so that it could get faceted if you want to get into semantics, but largely cold traffic is cold traffic. Warm traffic has a lot of facets to it, which is where we start breaking into, lukewarm or just regular warm or super hot, right?
Warm traffic is like onions, has a lot of layers.
Exactly. So what layer do you want to focus on right now, Jack?
Well, so since we dived into warm traffic as like a whole, before we get into like hot traffic, let's just talk about like warm traffic that aren't subscribers. So, maybe people who are lukewarm, were in your world and haven't done anything for a while. Maybe they haven't engaged with you, or people that are just fresh and new and they're discovering you for the first time. And, maybe they're poised to take a next step with you, but, they're not quite there yet. Let's focus on them, like the traditional warm audience.
Okay, cool. I'm into that. Because, it's a different conversation, isn't it? Between people who are new, you want to be like, hey, welcome, If you meet a new person and they come over to your house, you've already met them, and they come to your house for a party, which, sorry, that's not appropriate for the time we're in right now. But if they were, you'd be like, hey, welcome to my home. So glad you're here.
Hey, where's your mask?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And maybe you give them a mask at the door, whatever it is. It depends on how hospitable a host you are. But, it would be a very different conversation than someone you haven't seen in 10 years. And they show up at your house. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's so great to see you. I haven't talked to you in forever, Those are different. And the way that you want to talk to them is different. So I think it's good that you're kind of differentiating between the two because the conversation is different.
Yeah, totally. That was that was one of the big things that I wanted to touch on in this episode is like when we're talking about traffic temperature, a lot of it does hone in on how are you talking to these people based on what they're doing with you, based on where they are in, you can talk about the buddy system too, based on where they are in the buddy system. I know we did an episode a few months back where we kind of broke down different kinds of ad campaigns based on audiences and their stage in the buddy system. So that's a good one to touch back on. But that principle is exactly what applies here is like, how are you creating content, creating ads, creating experiences for people based on, where they're at, based on, how far along with you they are and whether they're new or whether they're old. You might create experiences for fans that are kind of like the OGs. For example, let's just like, I'll pick one out of thin air here. Like, let's say, you've got, a fan base that's spanned back, years and years and years, and maybe they've gone a little bit of cold. Maybe you're like a legacy artist, you played shows and now you haven't been. Maybe you wanted to run, kind of like a reactivation style campaign for those OG fans that are, lukewarm at this point, we'll call them. And you wanted to get them engaged in a cool way. Maybe you would run something like share your memories kind of campaign. And it could be like an opt-in campaign where, I don't know, they share photos of them and you and crowds at previous shows from years and years back. Just a cool way to engage those sorts of people. But that would speak very specifically to them and not someone who, just saw your new fan finder that you launched last week.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And this isn't just something that applies to email, right? Like Jack's saying, following up with people. And I've definitely, I turn the campaign on and off, but I run ads to people who are a certain age from engaging with my IG. And sometimes I'll just run existing posts on my IG to like get them to interact with stuff that's already there. So, if someone hasn't interacted with my profile in 365 days, I might send them, or, 364 days, right? So maybe I have an audience that is, 8 to 11 months old, right? 11 months and 30 days or whatever. But I'll run a post that happened in that time frame. And that usually will get them back over to my profile. And if someone doesn't engage with it, then they'll fall out of the audience, Yeah. And if someone does engage with it, now they're back in the, 1 day engagement audience. So you can run posts that they haven't seen by looking at the date you posted it and setting the audience to, the window of that would be after that post, So I typically do that actually. And I do that so that if people have engaged with me over a year ago, but maybe they haven't kept up with me, even if they don't follow me, right? Because sometimes what that does is it leads to them being like, oh yeah, Corrin. And then they come follow, because they're like, I don't want that to fall out of, what I'm paying attention to. And I also sometimes...
I was going to say that's such a cool strategy, like creating light bulb moments, and you're not relying on people to re-find you again or needing to reach them. That's like the kind of targeted engagement kind of stuff that you can't do organically, Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because, the machine, the algorithm decides whether or not someone's going to see your stuff.
And if they haven't engaged with you in over 6 months, chances are the machine's not going to be like, oh, here's this rando post from this profile you haven't interacted with in over 6 months. You can't rely on organic reach at that point. So yeah, and you could do that with a large audience. You could be like, okay, anybody who hasn't interacted in the last 90 days, show them, you could do an array of posts at the ad level, or you could just have one, right? Or the other option, and that's just using existing posts, which is, that's great and it stacks social proof and that's all good. But maybe you run if you post something cool and you run an ad to people who are that length of time from engagement, you can add copy to it, right? That says, hey, I wanted to make sure that you saw this. Only a small number of people are seeing this, and I wanted to make sure you saw it, and having that conversation, again, it's different depending on who they are. So you wouldn't want to show that to someone who is only a day since engaging with your IG.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the cool thing about warm traffic when talking about it, and this is something that like my kind of brain has expanded upon further and further and further over the years, is like, this is really the traffic temperature where I think you can get the most creative and allow yourself the most experimentation in terms of like what you can put in front of people, because you never really know, you never perfectly know, I should say, like what kind of offer someone is going to be ready to take based on where they're at. Some person might, someone who's just discovered you for the first time, they might, the next thing that they might do is buy from you. Right. Whereas other people who are just seeing you for the first time, like they might, take the slow poke route a little bit and just need to see some content for a while and engage with it and really, dive into the library of cool stuff that is you. So targeting your warm audience with a variety of different things is just a good way to make sure that you're putting the cool things in front of people that they might want to take you up on.
Right.
I think, and whether you're doing that with ads or whether you're doing it organically, the same principle applies. It's just allowing people to take some kind of next step with you, no matter what that next step might be.
Absolutely. There's something I worked with Jesse on our February ground report which is in our Indie Pro section. If you are an Indie Pro member, it's in Ground Reports. If you're not, go check it out. But I did a Ground Report with Jesse where he was talking a lot about kind of this, activating the fan base situation. And something that I kind of highlighted, I came in kind of as a guest on that Ground Report. And I was showing how with my email workflow, essentially, when people don't buy, they come in and are, I start populating different ads to them. Or even if they did buy, doing an upsell, right? And being able to attach copy to it. That's like, look, I know you already bought Gilded, right? Which is an album they purchased. Maybe you want to add At First Light, which is my EP that came after that. And making these offers via ads. And it's just so customized at that point that people are more likely to engage with something when they feel like the ad is for them and not for this wide audience, right? So the more you're tracking the temperature of these various people, the more custom you can make that message. And then the more chance, the higher chance that they're actually going to take you up on it because, you're speaking their language at that point.
So I'm so glad you said that. You're killing it with the segues today.
Yeah.
It's a perfect transition into hot traffic. Let's talk about, the hot potato traffic of people who are freshly, super engaged. Typically when we talk about hot traffic, it's people who just bought, especially
Right.
like when we're talking e-commerce, it also could be people who just subscribed to something or just went through an experience that could be considered hot traffic as well. People who are in the middle of a launch with you. But typically, like a lot of times it is people who just bought. And these are the people who, are likely the most excited about whatever action they just took. So this is a great opportunity to engage with them further. And it's not always about picking up a second purchase, although that certainly works really, really, really well. But also like just generally speaking, like thanking them is a great way to stay in front of this kind of traffic and garnering that goodwill, creating, a dream come true experience that extends beyond just the product or the package that's being sent to them. And also, what they're seeing online and what they're getting in their email. Like these are all kind of like hot traffic touch points that you can get into.
Absolutely. I mean, that's another thing is that, if I send out an email confirmation, a shipment confirmation, for example, I can add people to a Facebook audience that's like, oh my gosh, it shipped. I can't wait till it gets to you. I just wanted to, tell you hi, right? Or, and these are very low budget ads, right? These literally can be, a couple of bucks a day or whatever, sometimes even $1 a day, depending on the size of the audience, if you're just going for reach, which is really what I do in a lot of these cases. If I'm trying to make a sales offer, not so much. I don't, optimize for reach at that point. But if I'm just saying hello, that's very valuable, right? It's almost like you're sending them a personal message at that point because it's so custom to where they are. Something else that I really like doing is outside of just these general, touching back with you kind of ads is, really transferring them from one step of buddy system to the other. So, when people go through my Gilded experience, for example, they get an email. Don't get me wrong. I'm not relying solely on ads. I'm sending them an email as well. So in the ad, I'll say, hey, I sent you an email as well, but I wanted to make sure you saw this. And that combination, that 1-2 punch kind of situation can be very, very effective. So whether that's, hey, I invited you to my Facebook group and, you haven't come in to hang out with us, go to this link. You can't, that's a, mediocre example because you can't send people to a Facebook group link, but you can send them to a page on your site that you built. And then there's a button there to send them to your Facebook group. But this keeps people moving through the buddy system and it makes you omnipresent, right? Which we've already kind of talked about when, we've talked about our green light warmth boosting strategy. But it makes sure that they remember who you are. If they continue not to engage with you over time, they'll fall out of that audience, and then, no love lost. It just wasn't a great fit. Maybe maybe it's a time of life that they're not into right now, and you can feed them an ad later once they hit that, almost 365-day break, right? Or your website break. You could do it for the, people who haven't engaged with you on your site for 160 to 180 days and send them to your site. I mean, it gives you a lot of insight into the people that are likely to come back and allows you to put more of your budget into those people to elevate them from warm traffic to, hotter traffic. And I think that's a really valuable way to really identify who you should be investing in.
Totally. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think, hot traffic again is an interesting one, like warm traffic, in that I think some people get a little antsy when it comes to advertising to people too much and doing too much retargeting, especially like sequential retargeting, because they think like, oh, it's going to be creepy. Like, I don't want people to think I'm weird or stalking them. But, and you and I were talking about this yesterday, about like retargeting ads in particular, is like,
right.
To most, like, most people who aren't like immersed in their marketing or marketing in general, the average human being on the earth, they're not really thinking about it all that much.
Right.
As long as the experience and the messaging is like true to you and not like, all of a sudden they feel like they're being, a posted in front of them that was written by somebody, else that isn't you. Most times they're going to just be like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I did a thing, and look at all the ways that my favorite artist or my favorite band is reaching out to me to follow up with me, whether that be thanking you for a purchase or, giving you a little something extra, or staying, making sure that I'm kept in their world, or putting new content in front of me, creating new things for me. As long as it's in your voice, retargeting is a powerful thing for, I think, relationship building.
Absolutely.
Quite the opposite of what some people get afraid of when they talk about it, feeling creepy. I honestly think it's quite the opposite, as long as you put things in front of your fans that are authentic and true to you.
Yeah, especially if it changes, right? Like, so when I retarget people, for example, after they purchase, not only am I speaking to exactly the types of products that they've engaged with or not, or purchased or not. Not only that, but I kind of make it fun. I'm like, ooh, there's hidden deals in here, and you're changing up the creative that, basically they're not seeing the same thing over and over. And really all that's doing is simulating what we wish our organic reach looked like, right? But then makes it more custom. So I don't think people are as sensitive to being advertised if you're kind of open and cheeky about it. And you say basically some kind of narrative where it's like, this is of a benefit to you, right? And, mixing in some stuff that maybe isn't a sales offer. But people are looking at ads in their feed constantly. So if there's a way that you can run these retargeting ads in a way that doesn't seem like other ads they're seeing, they're probably not even going to notice that it's an ad because, they've engaged with you recently. They may have followed you on Instagram, or even if they didn't, they may not even realize that they didn't follow you on Instagram. And it's just going to look like something you posted and that, the algorithm decided to show them. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways to do it in a way that's very tasteful, doesn't come off creepy, and instead just communicates like, look, I know where you are. I know not where you are, like your home. That's not what I mean.
Not creepy
like,
at all.
Not creepy. That would be really creepy. Like, hey, you in Simi Valley, California. No, like I more mean, where they are in their relationship.
I know you're here. Thank you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I know you're here, and here's the next thing you can do. I'd love to have you in this new clan of, where you are in this progression. So, if it makes sense to them and it's something that they would, naturally be interested in, go for it. They're not going to think it's creepy.
Totally. Yeah. A hot traffic kind of strategy that I like is for like post-purchase retargeting, not even for like going after a second sale, is just retargeting with other like user generated content from other fans. Cause you probably see this with like brands, like you might pick something up on a store, a company that you like, whatever it might be. I don't know. You might see like after the fact, you get hit with like thank you and review style ads. I think it's cool that you can do this as an artist because you can let people know like, hey, thanks so much for picking up what you did. Thanks for joining my crew. Look at our team, like look at our squad. We're rolling squad deep. Look at all the people, you can have them wearing the same thing that they just bought or holding the thing that they just picked up. And it kind of creates this sense of tribe and community for the person. It makes them feel validated in whatever step they just took with you. If it's a sale, for example, it makes them feel like, oh yeah, like I'm a part of this. It's cool. You could have like a call to action in there if you wanted to. That's like, when you get it or if you got it, you could set up time windows. That's like, I don't want this ad to go out for 14 days. I know that they'll have gotten their shipment by then. It could be an ad that's like, yo, thanks for joining the crew. Like, look at the rest of us. Drop me a photo of you in the comments or something like that. And that kind of encourages user generated content, which is cool. You could use that to sort of build upon this system, but more so it just, creates excitement in the relationship with that fan. And that's not even asking for another purchase.
Right.
Just, easy hot traffic stuff you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I do as well. And I think I've touched on that before, but if people purchase from me, I have it set up where I'm tracking their delivery, right? Based on their tracking information. And, that can be flawed because it's not always marked as delivered, especially internationally. But it's okay if it's imperfect because, you're still doing your best to reach out to people who, are basically falling into that audience. And so I will send them an email that says, hey, would you mind leaving me a review? And then they go into my store and they leave a review. Not only does that refresh their Pixel audience status, but it also gets them back in my store. And the number of follow-up sales that have resulted from that is kind of remarkable, really. Or at least they'll peruse around and then they become eligible for retargeting of specific products, right? So yeah, there's a lot of really smart ways that you can use hot traffic to, be of benefit to them, as well as, just keep sending them back to your site.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So that's all I got for today. How about you, Jack?
I think that was a great little recap on traffic temperatures and some of the things that we see working. Like I said, I think warm traffic is one of the most fun ones because like I'm just constantly getting fed new creativity on like what can be done in that space because you can be so experimental in it. Hot traffic too. And it's kind of like those are kind of like the neglected children. Everyone's always like, I need more attention. You don't.
Right.
Capitalize on the attention that you do have. That's why it's important to know these traffic temperatures because if you know them, then you know how many people are sort of hanging out in them. And you can start putting together really, really cool campaigns to sort of capitalize on that, build those relationships with those fans and take them to the next level.
Absolutely. And I definitely, as far as advertising dollars or just general efforts, prioritize people who are the most recent. If they're super hot, then, they have a different kind of experience from me than, medium hot, then, lukewarm, and then into cold. I prioritize my dollars to, keep people in the fold if they've made a lot of indications that they want to be there, right? So I think that's something for, hopefully that is helpful. I think, if you are a completely grassroots artist and you have next to no warm traffic, then you're going to want to invest in your cold traffic because you need to, build those people up. But if you've got a lot of super hot and then some warm and then some lukewarm, invest in them, invest your time and invest any money that you can into making sure that they don't reach that warm or lukewarm or, gone cold kind of traffic. Always make the effort to make sure that people kind of stay where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of why these sort of gauges, these temperature gauges exist to make sure that you're keeping people, where you want them to be.
Right, exactly. So that's all for Creative Juice for today. I hope that you found this helpful. Sometimes it really helps to just go back and revisit. And if there's something in this episode that, kind of reminds you that there's a hole, even if you already knew kind of what we're talking about, are you activating on it? Hopefully this can help you kind of highlight where you haven't put the effort in, and go ahead and do that. Next week, we'll be back to our nerdier deep dive kind of stuff. But in the meantime, thanks so much for joining me, Jack. And we'll see you next week on Creative Juice.
Peace out, Indies.
Can y'all really feel the East Coast, feel the West Coast, feel